Kevin, what's being done at the bank initiative to address this issue, or is anything being done in terms of career development, career readiness?
Well, it's a huge issue, and obviously, from the bank's perspective, everything revolves around the sustainability of the community, as we're working towards more regionalization as the bank has expanded. We're trying to make Lake City all of northern Indiana,
And now Indy.
And now Indy, yeah. But we've been around since 1872, and we plan on being around another 150 years. And so really, I guess I'm fortunate in the fact that I see my job as doing everything I can to help foster economic development, resources within the community, especially human resources.
Is there a specific initiative that you think addresses that the bank's really behind?
Yeah, we have our own Lake City University, and we put a lot of investment into that, both in the form of time and money. And basically what we tell our people is that that university isn't to necessarily foster bank employees, it's to develop people. And consequently, the name's recently been changed to People Development Center. We know a lot of our employees don't start out their careers at Lake City Bank wanting to be a bank teller the rest of their life, and that's fine. We want them to develop as best they can, and in the meantime, they're very valuable employees, and the more opportunities we can give them to develop and grow, ultimately the more likely they are to stay with us. So it's a quid pro quo.
So some of them may actually be surprised that, wow, I just came here to get a job, but maybe this could become a career.
Absolutely.
All right.
And it's been very beneficial to the business in the form of constant employees, very low turnover, and obviously highly trained and highly competent employees if they stay within the organization.
Thanks. Rita, your thoughts on specific initiatives that might address this from your vantage point?
Well, if you take a look at the opportunities from a broadcast avenue, it's just unbelievable, the opportunities now, because several years ago we were purchased by Federated Media. This made a little bit of a different situation for all of us, and all of us were a little tentative about that to the beginning because a huge broadcasting corporation was buying our radio stations. So what's going to happen to us? How are things going to change? Basically, they did change, and in many instances, they changed for the better because they had the all-powerful deep pockets to come in and make our broadcasting system much better technology-wise and training. In all the years I was in radio, especially in radio sales, I had never had any formal training in selling. I could probably write a contract on the back of a napkin as quickly as I could anything else, or coffee. And then I found out that I was being challenged then to do everything really the right way and proposing things and thinking things through at a much higher level. That was challenging for me for a long time. In fact, when they brought all the computer system and everything in, I thought this will be the undoing of my radio career. I'll probably have to quit over this. But I did have to learn it, and in learning it, I found out that there were so many better ways to serve the community in a much more effective way by those new ways of doing things. So really, I think probably in looking at our broadcast situation right now, we have more opportunities than ever before to be a positive force in the community. And I think one of those ways that we are a very positive force is through the non-for-profits and through the avenues in which we can really help people really succeed in the different things that they do. Right now we're having a big food drive for CCS. That will be our main focus for the next 3 days. And hopefully we can do better with that than we did before. We grouped with Curlin Motors on the coat drive this year. We're on almost 1,200 coats for that situation. That, to me, in addition to the business part of it, is the most valuable thing that we can do as being a viable product in this community for helping people.
So being that voice of the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Caleb, I know you've got a lot cooking, pun intended. So tell us, what are some of those initiatives?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the, or some of the panelists actually dinner at the restaurant last night introduced into a chef who grew up in Fort Wayne, worked at Pizza Hut, came and worked at the restaurant, went off to school at Hyde Park, New York, at Culinary Institute of America. And if you're not familiar with Culinary Institute of America, it is an amazing school. He spent $80,000 in 2 years on a degree to cook food, and probably made none of that back. And what really surprised me is that he now works at the restaurant. So here you've got an individual who left, went to school in New York, had an internship in Aspen, Colorado, an internship in Manhattan, and now came back to Warsaw, Winona Lake. So this is exactly what we're talking about. Why did he do that? It really forced us to ask that question. We had another chef that went out to the same program, and now he's back again. So now I've got 2 world-class chefs in Winona Lake, and it makes us kind of refocus. When we first started the restaurant, our purpose wasn't necessarily food. So our passion statement at the restaurant is to create an environment of communication and communion to every table, while bringing the customer in a modern setting that encourages that, if that makes sense. We do that through food. That's our catch. That's our why is communication and communion, and through that food. And so I don't know if you guys are familiar with TED Talks, but Simon Sinek did a TED Talk on why. It starts with why, and finally that makes sense for us, and it's kind of been able to be quantified by this theory. But when we first started, our why was communication and commitment through food. And I think that's why we're finding staff gravitating back to that belief. We asked those 2 guys, I sat down with them on separate occasions, so why did you come back to the area? And they said, because here we feel like we have a family. And I think that's really exciting, and I think that's what this is all about.
So some would say, okay, Caleb, so why Indianapolis? Why not start another cerulean locally? Why'd you have to go to the big city?
That's a great question. Unlike some of the businesses, we feel like Kosciuszko County is kind of the extent of our reach. The Indianapolis Initiative was actually spurred on by employees and staff members, if that can make sense at all. We hired very young. When we first opened 5 years ago in Winona Lake, we hired every single person that we knew, regardless of resume or experience. When we first started, we were teaching Grace College and Warsaw and Lakeland students how to cook food that they probably weren't familiar with. And so it's been a huge learning experience. Those same people are still with us today, many of which have been with us 5 or 6 years. They're having kids, they're getting married, they're having families, and they're saying, we love this, we want to do this more, how can we provide? Right now we've got close to 60 employees at Cerulean, we've had 100 in the course of the year, and we've really maxed out what we can do in Kosciuszko County. And so when we look at Indiana as a whole, we want to expand that same type of education. In Manhattan, when you're walking down the street, and they look at you, and there's a derogatory remark, they call you a Hoosier. We want to really fight that mentality. So Indianapolis is just another step that we can take to educate the state as a whole, and not just our county, I feel, and hopefully provide a service and a life for our staff.
That's a great vision. Great vision. Congratulations. Brad, I know OrthoWorks is really trying to get its arms around this very issue, because developing and being able to launch local talent back into the orthopedic industry is huge. Sometimes it's hard to recruit to this part of the world. So what's OrthoWorks doing?
Yeah, it is, when I boil down to what we were formed to do, what we were funded to do, to me it's all about talent, retention, and attraction. And so the key elements of that are, number one is jobs. Now, we're blessed, beyond belief, in terms of what this community has, small rural community, has 7,000 incredibly good, high-tech, high-paying jobs. So the challenge is keeping them here. So I think that it's really more about, it's not about brain drain, it's about brain attraction, or brain magnetism. What are the things that we can do that either keep brains here, get them to return here, or attract them here to the community.
And yet sometimes we hear some stories, and they're anecdotal, but we hear them nonetheless, that, well, I don't think those big companies look too kindly on those local kids. They think they have to go to the big schools to recruit those kids, or they have to go to the big cities to recruit that cutting-edge talent. What would you say about that perception?
I guess it sort of depends on the job. I mean, the industry's gotten so advanced and complex that you need the requirement, you need whatever the qualifications are for that position, from the factory floor to the corner office. So if a local student has those kinds of qualifications, then I think they have as great a shot as anybody. And there are some tremendous success stories. I was thinking about, so we were talking about people wanting to see the world, Many may know Brian Beckman, he's a local kid, went to work for Biomed after he got out of IU. You know, his passport must be as thick as the Manhattan phone book, because he's always on a plane. You know, that's just the nature of these kinds of jobs. So, so I think there's plenty of opportunity for anybody that wants it. The challenge is making sure that those jobs stay here. You know, Dr. Carr mentioned last night, Ellis, Iowa was 1 or 2 slips away from tumbleweeds rolling down the main street. And we're probably more slips away than that, but if we're not thoughtful and strategic about how we keep those jobs here in the community, you know, we could be in that position pretty quickly.
Some of the student sponsorship programs really intrigue me. Could you envision Earthworks getting involved in something where even at the junior high level, they identified high promising kids and said, you know what, if you'll study hard and work hard and go off and get a degree, we'll help you pay for that if you come back and work here for 10 years. Could you envision something like that happening in our community?
Yeah, you know, it doesn't strike me as a wild proposal. I think one of the interesting things that's happening, Dr. Carr referred to it last night, and I know there's momentum around this in Indiana, is sort of the merging of high school, community college, vocational training, career training, those kinds of things. And I can see that going further into the school system. I think that's a direction we are headed and we need to head.
All right, good. Well, we'll talk about obstacles a little bit later, but I wanted you to hear about what is going on, some of those initiatives that are happening, and hopefully it will spur some thinking, and we'll be able to do some more connecting of the dots. Thanks, panel, for not only being here today, but for what you do in our community. I'll ask our next panel to make their way up. They'll take their name tags with them.